everyone and welcome to my craft room. I'm Leo from inkymemories.co.uk, an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in South Wales, and on this workshop Wednesday we are going to be making a really fun shaker card using the ridiculously awesome stamp set and the sequins for everything. We're also going to be doing some heat embossing in this one, which is something we've not done so far on the channel, so I'm looking forward to that. So the products we're going to be using today, like I said, ridiculously awesome stamp set and the sequins for everything. The other things that we're going to be using are the layering circles framelit dies. I'm going to be using the Stampin' Cut and Emboss, the new die cutting machine. And like I said, we are going to be doing some heat embossing today using some white embossing powder and the heat embossing tool. So let us get started. The first thing that we need to do is to cut all of the cardstock pieces that we need for today's project. So I've got some cardstock here and I'll just bring in my trimmer. So first of all, I'm going to cut my card base, and we're going to be using basic black for this one. So I have here a standard sheet of A4. And using my trimmer, I'm going to cut this at 14.85 centimetres, making sure the cardstock is butted up nicely against the edge, and then just pulling the dark grey trimmer blade straight down. And then rotating that, I'm going to put it at 10.5, which is halfway across a sheet of A4. Put the guard back in place again, making sure it's butted up firmly against the edge, and then using the pale grey side, this is the scoring side, I'm just going to run that through a couple of times to create our score line for our card base. The other things that we're going to be needing then are a mat for the front of the card. We're using crushed curry for this. Now this is just a piece I've already pre-cut for another project at some point, and I'm just going to cut it to the size we need it today. So I need this at 13.85, so 1 centimetre smaller than the card base. And then 9.5 wide. So it's 1 centimetre smaller, both horizontally and vertically. And there is our card mat. I'm also going to need a mat for the inside of the card. Since this is a black card base, it's very difficult to write on black cardstock, so I'm going to pop a white mat in there for writing on. And this is going to be 13.35. So again, this is 1.5 centimetres smaller. There we go, 13.35, and then this is going to be 9 centimetres wide. So that's the mat for the inside. I'm also going to be needing some DSP for this, and I've picked out this really gorgeous sort of ombre piece, and this has actually come from the Playing with Patterns 6-inch squared designer series paper stack, which, as you can see, I'm working my way through quite nicely already, and I've only had this for a little while. So we're going to be using this ombre piece. This is in crushed curry, so the top colour is crushed curry, and then obviously it gets paler from there. And I want it to be this way on my card, not this way. So I'm going to make sure that I cut the sort of narrow length first. So I'm going to do this at 9 centimetres. It's the same as the mat we did for the inside of the card. And I'm going to keep the darker colour and cut off from the paler colour. So again, I want this to go to 13.35. And there is the mat for the front of the card as well. The last thing that I'm going to need then is actually some window sheet. So this is, pop this over here. So this is called window sheet. It's just basically clear acetate plastic like this that you can use to form boxes if you want to, but they make really great windows in cards as well. And I don't have a piece pre-cut that is quite big enough for what I'm going to need. So I'm going to hack into a new sheet today. And these come on 12 by 12 inch sheets, and you just then cut them to size. So So I'm just going to eyeball how much I'm likely to need. That should do. There we go. And that's just a strip that I've grabbed out of that. Okay, that is all of the cutting that I need to do. I have also a scrap of basic black cardstock that we're going to be using for our heat embossing a bit later, but this is just from my scraps box. It's not a particular size, just as long as it is big enough for your stamp. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the die cutting done so we can actually get those parts gluing together and give time for the adhesive to dry. So if I just move most of this out of the way, all I'm going to be needing are the crushed curry mat and the acetate first of all. And then I shall bring in my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine and flop open the platforms. And I have here my plates, so I've got the base plate, so number 1. I then have the thin die adapter, so number 2. And then my cutting plate on top, which as you can see is getting scarred up quite nicely. And then if I bring in the layering circles frameless dies, we're going to be using 2 different size circles for this project. Now I've used the circles on this side, so we're going to be using the biggest one and then the next one in. Now for this you want to make sure that the 2 circles that you're using have enough of a gap between them so you've got room to adhere your window sheet inside the aperture or sort of opening that you've cut. So we're going to be making the bigger circle, we're going to cut that out of the acetate, and the smaller one out of the crushed curry mat. So let's do the mat first of all. I'm using the smaller of the 2 circles. I want to try and line this up so that it is roughly the same width across my piece, and the same gap here I want up here as well, as much as possible. And I think that is about right. So I'll pop my second plate 3 on top very carefully so that die doesn't move. Feed it in and then crank it through the machine. And this goes through so smoothly. It's still taking me a little bit to get used to using this new die cutting machine. I'm so used to my old Big Shot making all kinds of crunches and clicks as it goes through. Okay, so there is the curry piece with our aperture cut out of it, and this then is scrap. So bringing in the acetate here, I'm going to pop my large die onto it. Kind of difficult to see this. I'm just going to make sure that I do have that actually all on the acetate and it's not hanging off the edge. Pop plate 3 again on top to complete the sandwich, and then feed this through. Now this does make a bit more of a noise when you're feeding this through, just because you are cutting that acetate. There we go, all done. A lot more noise than cutting cardstock. Okay. So there is our die cut circle of acetate, which is the part we want to keep this time. And then the rest of that can go back in the packet. And that's all the die cutting that we need to do for this particular project. And so I'll just pop this away. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, before we glue these together, I'm just going to do a tiny bit of stamping on this base piece here. So I'm going to be using crushed curry ink, so the same ink as I'm using cardstock. And then from the stamp set, I want to bring out this piece. It's kind of like a little starburst, I guess, or a sunburst in this case. I'm just going to pop this on a block, so I've got a clear block B for this one. And all I want to do is make sort of sun rays around the edge of the opening that we've cut in the cardstock. So I'm just going to quickly add some of these around the edge. Some of them closer, some of them slightly further away. Doesn't matter if they go off the edge of the cardstock either. Just helps to give the idea of the sun rays coming out of our little opening here. There we go, just like that. And in fact, while I have this open, I'm also going to stamp the inside. Since we've got the ink out and the stamp, we might as well. I'm just going to use exactly that same image and just pop one of those down in the corner, and we'll do the same on the envelope as well. And this is just a Whisper White envelope that I'm using, and I'm going to do exactly the same in the corner, just one of those little sunbursts on there. Okay, so like I said, we need to glue the window sheet onto the mat and give that time to dry. So flipping this piece over onto the back, I'm going to take some liquid glue, and I'm just going to run this right the way around the edge, quite close to the opening, but not too close. We don't want the glue to come through, but you need it to be reasonably close, because otherwise the window sheet won't actually reach your glue line. Make sure that you don't put too much glue onto this. You don't want it to all squidge out around the edges, because it will ruin the look of your project. And then taking your piece of acetate, pop this over the glue line that you've just made, making sure that it is pressed firmly into place. Just like that. And then we're going to pop this to one side and allow that glue to fully dry while we move on with the rest of the project. So the next thing that we're going to be doing then is the heat embossing. So I'm bringing back in here my piece of scrap basic black cardstock. I'm going to be grabbing You Are My Sunshine from the stamp set. And this is a clear block E that I'm using for this one. Apparently I've managed to chip my nail varnish already, and I've got a piece of that, so let me just pick that off, or that's not going to adhere nicely to my block. Okay, there we go. So pick up your stamp onto your clear block, and because we are heat embossing onto black, I am actually going to bring in my embossing buddy. So this is just basically a small bag filled with, I think it's cornstarch or talcum powder, something along those lines. All it does, it helps to remove static and also any sort of grease marks on your cardstock, which would ruin your heat embossing. So just swish this across the surface. Don't worry that it's making sort of white lines. You won't see those in your finished project at all. And once you've done that, you want to be very careful not to touch the surface of your cardstock, because you'll just put greasy fingerprints straight back on it. So I'm going to line up a couple of things so that I'm all ready to go. I've got here some white embossing powder. Now I use these sort of food tubs to keep my embossing powder in. Just helps to keep it a bit neater for myself. So I'm going to pop this to one side and unscrew the lid so that I'm ready to go. And this is just white embossing powder that I'm using here. And then I have here my Versamark ink. Now Versamark is really handy. The ink actually stays quite sticky once you have inked up your stamp and stamped it. It gives you time then to attach the embossing powder onto your stamped image and get that nice sort of heat embossed look. So because this is quite a big stamp, I'm going to bring my ink to the stamp this time and just thoroughly ink this up. Definitely don't want to scrimp on this one. You want to make sure you've got plenty of ink all the way over the surface of your stamp so that it transfers nicely and gives your embossing powder a good surface to cling to. Still light taps though, still don't need to be smushing the ink actually into the stamp. So once you've got your ink on there, I want to do this twice on this piece of cardstock. So I'm going to try and keep one to one edge and one to the other. So first one going down. Make sure you've got nice even pressure all the way over the stamp to really transfer that ink, and you should be able to see there that has stamped nicely. And then very quickly I'm going to do the same again just on the other side. So ink up the stamp again, Getting a good amount of that Versamark ink all over the stamp there. And then pop this down in this corner. And again, nice, firm, even pressure over the surface of the stamp to make sure you get a good transfer of ink on there. And then bringing this over to my embossing powder, I'm going to start with this side and just sprinkle the powder over where we've just stamped. And because that ink stays nice and tacky, this powder, which is actually small granules of wax, I believe, this is the way it works, they'll all cling really nicely to that nice sticky ink. Give it a tap to kind of move it over the surface, and then we're just going to pour the excess back in. And this is why I use a huge food tub for this. There's no way I'd be able to get this back into that tiny, tiny pot. You can also use a folded piece of paper underneath and then just pour that back into the pot. Just going to repeat this then on the other side. Be generous with this. You want to make sure you don't end up with any patches on your image. Give it a tap to move it over the surface of that ink and then pour off the excess. And give that all a good tap to make sure you get any loose stray parts off. And just double check your images. If you think you've got a little hole, so there's a little patch just in there, I'll pop a little bit more back on. Just fill that back in. There we go, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to pop the lid back onto my embossing powder before I get my heat tool out, just so I don't end up accidentally heating the entire tub's worth of embossing powder. And then I shall pull in my heat tool. So this is just Stampin' Up standard heat tool, nice and simple. It is quite noisy, so I shall just talk through what we're going to do first of all. Basically, we're going to pop this onto the number 2 setting, the hottest one we do, and then just gently wave this over the surface of this. Not too close, you don't want to scorch your cardstock, and you also don't want to blow away all of those granules of embossing powder that we've got stuck on here. What you'll start to see, at the moment you can see it looks kind of dusty where the granules are. As it heats and starts to set, it will actually go whiter and glossier. So I'm just going to do that now, and like I said, this is quite noisy. There we go, I'm happy that is all done. So you can see now the surface of the embossing powder is nice and shiny, and that is all kind of fused together nicely and no longer rubs off your cardstock. So we're going to move on, and we're actually going to fussy cut this out, which literally just means we're going to be using a pair of scissors to cut out the pieces. Now the reason I've stamped and done 2 of these is that we want to get the sunshine word and the you are my as 2 separate pieces, and it's kind of hard to get one out without cutting into the other or getting too close to the edge. If you think you can do it with just the one, absolutely do just the one. I've just done it this way to make sure that I can definitely do it without ruining both pieces. So, cutting off the excess just to make it easy for myself first of all, I'm going to come in around this and grab out the you are my. I think I am going to use the second sunshine then to cut this one out. So all I'm going to do is just go round the edge of this shape, leaving a little bit of a border of the black cardstock showing around the edge of the sentiment that we have heat embossed there. I'm not going to go around every single letter. Some of it I will do just as a rough shape, for example here under that swirl. And you can do this however works best for you. And when you're fussy cutting like this, you want to be moving the cardstock, not your scissors. That is the best way to get nice rounded edges, not square sort of blunt scissor strokes on there. And then I'm just going to continue cutting this around the edge. There is our finished fussy cut word, and then I'm just going to cut out these 3 little words as well, and I'm just going to cut these nice and simply, just nice square pieces right around the edge, so just a very small black border on these. Okay, so I've got all of my pieces fussy cut. Just going to pop those to one side and move all of these scraps out of the way. And then we shall move on to assembling our card. So if I bring back in my card base I have here, just make sure I don't have any more embossing powder on here. So I'm going to fold along the score line, and then using my bone folder, just burnish and enforce that score line to give our card a nice crease. And then I'm going to stick in, I'm going to get the mat stuck on the front of the DSP and then also on the inside the white mat as well. Just using liquid glue for this, just a nice thin bead of glue around the edge or thereabouts and a bit across the middle. And then pop this down, wiggle it into place just to make sure you have that nicely lined up, and then squeeze it down. And then opening that up, I shall get the mat inside as well in exactly the same way. So a bit of glue just around the edge and across the middle. And then pop this inside. Again, just wiggle it while that glue is still liquid, and then smooth it into place. Okay. The next thing that we're going to be doing then, now that we have our base all prepped, is moving on to adding on the window part of the card. So I have here the crushed curry mat that we glued the acetate to earlier, and as you can see the glue on there has dried nicely. And for this today I'm going to be using the foam adhesive strips. Now if you saw my recent Tip Tuesday video all about the adhesive that Stampin' Up offers, you will have heard me mention that these are great for shaker cards, and I'm going to show you exactly why today. So I'm going to grab a strip of this. This is a new sheet, so this isn't the easiest to get just the one out. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. And these are very similar to dimensionals. It's basically a piece of foam, and you have adhesive on the bottom and then a piece of adhesive on the top as well, with like a backing paper layer on that, just protecting it to start off with. And because they are so thin, they bend really nicely, which makes them perfect for this type of project. So what I'm doing here is just adding the adhesive around the edge of the acetate that I've got, making sure I keep it away from the edge. You don't want any of this to show through the window on your finished card, so don't put it too close. And just bend it gently as you're going around the edge of the acetate there. And I've just got a tiny bit of overlap, so I'm just going to snip that off. And then pop those two edges together. And give that a good press just to make sure that it is all nicely stuck down to your base. And then I'm going to use another piece of this, so another strip, just to add some adhesive around the edges, just to hold the piece of crushed curry cardstock to the base of our card. So I don't need huge chunks for this. I'm just going to cut some small pieces. So I'm going to put a piece across each corner at the top. And again, try not to get too close to the edge. You don't really want this to be seen through the edges of your project once you've finished. And pop a piece down the bottom, just to give a bit of stability to the corners down there as well. A piece across the bottom. Just like that. And I'm going to pop a couple of pieces here as well, just beyond the opening that we've cut. And again, this is just to give it that little bit of extra stability when it is stuck to the card base. And then this piece, I'm just going to pop it back onto the sheet, ready for another project. And again, just push all of these down firmly, make sure that the adhesive has nicely adhered to the base. The last thing I'm going to do before we assemble this then is add on some ribbon. So this is the gingham ribbon. This is in Bumblebee. It's just this really cute, fun, narrow gingham ribbon in Bumblebee and white. I'm going to tie a bow around the front of my card. So grab some of this. Possibly a little bit more. There we go. So just a nice simple bow on here, nothing too elaborate. Try and keep the ribbon as flat as you can. It just helps it to look as neat as possible, and also keeps it from being too bulky on your finished project. Tying bows has never been my strong point. I am getting better, I'm doing it more often, so you know, it's something that I am getting better at, but I don't know that I'm ever going to be good at it. Okay, so using my good sharp scissors, I'm just going to pull through these loops until I'm happy with them. I think they look about right. And then I shall trim the tails of the ribbon, making sure that I cut them at an angle, and that helps to stop the ribbon fraying on your project, unless that's a look you particularly want, in which case obviously you can pull the edges. Give it a final little bit of adjustment, so I'm happy with that bow. And now it is start filling the card. Now a shaker card isn't a shaker card without filling, and this is where the sequins for everything are going to come in. So I have my card base and my card top, and I have the sequins here. Now what I've done with these sequins, I've actually taken them all out of the box that they come in and put them into separate Ziploc bags. And the ones I'm going to be using today are this sort of bright orange mix and the white, gold and silver mix. So on my card base, I'm just going to add a little pile of sequins, and you probably want a generous pinch of each of these colourways. And try and keep them fairly centred on your card. Just like that. They are a little bit staticky, so they do stick to your fingers. Just make sure you're not flicking them off all around the craft room. So that's the orange. And then, oh, no, there's one. And then a generous pinch again of the gold and silver and white mix. You don't want to be too stingy with sequins for a shaker card. You want there to be plenty to shake around. But similarly, you don't want to have too many either. If you do have too many, you might find that the card doesn't adhere properly. It's sort of too bulgy. So it's definitely a balancing act with that one, but I think that should be just about right. So now is time to peel off the backing paper from all of this adhesive. Making sure that I don't nudge that huge pile of sequins and dislodge them all. Okay, and just the ones at the bottom. Okay, and now we put the top onto the base of our card. So I'm going to hold this to make sure I can line this up nicely on my card, as well as getting it over where the sequins are. So I think that is just about right. Once you're happy with the position, just again press firmly, especially around the circle where you are containing all of those sequins. You don't want those to go flying when your recipient opens the card. And then where you've got the glue adhesive strips around the edges, just make sure again they are firmly pressed into place. And there you can see our sequins are nicely shaken around in the middle. So the final thing to do on our card is to adhere the sentiment pieces that we cut out earlier. I'm going to do this again just with liquid glue. I'm going to start with the sunshine first of all. So just again, as always with liquid glue, less is definitely more, but you want to make sure that you do go quite close to the edges on this one, just to make sure that all of the pieces stay nicely stuck and don't sort of ping up off the front of your card. So I should just run some glue all the way around the edge and then a little bit across the middle. I'm going to sit this down towards the bottom of the aperture that we've cut. Now because we are sticking this onto the acetate, you may just need to hold a couple of the edges in place just to give the glue a chance to bond and get firmly stuck on there. And once you're happy that it is in place, we shall move on then to the tiny words. And you really just need a very, very small amount of glue on the back of these. You definitely do not want the glue to come squidging out of the edges on these at all. And we're just going to add these down the left-hand side. So you are, and then finally my. If you have a tiny pair of craft tweezers, they would definitely come in handy for this. Pop that one into place. And again, since we are gluing onto the acetate, just hold those in place just for a moment, just to give the glue a chance to properly bond for you. And then that is our finished card for today. And the envelope that we made to go with it. So there we go, you are my sunshine, and that's a really cute and fun shaker card with lots of cool sequins in the middle. and I really hope that you have enjoyed this project. Thank you again for joining me in my craft room today. If you have liked this project, please do give this video a thumbs up. It helps me know that you're enjoying these sort of workshops that I am putting out there for you. If you have any questions or comments about this project or any of the products that I've used today, please pop those in the comments box below. I'd be happy to answer them and help you out. If you are new to my channel, please do consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell as well, and you will be notified every single time I post a new video. All of the products that I have used today are available in my store through Stampin Up, and there'll be a link in the description below if you wanted to shop there. If you don't currently have a demonstrator and you are based in the UK, there will also be a link in the description directly to the web form on my website where you can request a copy of all of our latest catalogues. Please do that. I'll be happy to get those into the post out to you as soon as possible. If you have a go at making this project or something inspired by it, I would love to see your creations. You can tag me on Facebook at Inky Memories or on Instagram at Leo McJames, or use the hashtag Inky Memories, and I'll come and check out the project that you've put together. Again, thank you so much for joining me in my craft room today. It's been fun having you here, and I shall see you next time. Bye bye.